Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to discuss different speech patterns seen in schizophrenia. We'll start off by talking about alogia. This is also known as poverty of speech. Typically these patients have very short responses and their speech lacks detail or depth. So an example of this is a patient who works as a chef and then they're asked what they do for work and the patient only responds food. They just don't have the ability to convey what they do in any type of real detail. Next up, we have looseness of associations, which is also known as derailment. And patients exhibiting this will often jump from one topic to another without there being any real logical connection between ideas. There can be some superficial connections, but generally they aren't logical or they don't make much sense. So, for example, a patient might say, I went to the store to buy bread. Bread is made from wheat, and wheat grows in fields. I saw a bird driving past the field. So here you can see some superficial connections, but the story just doesn't make any sense, isn't really coherent. Next, we have circumstantiality. This is when there's excessively long answers with irrelevant information when answering a question. The important thing here is that patients will eventually get to the point, it's just that it takes so long. So, for example, when a patient visits their therapist, he says, I wanted to tell you about my meeting today, but before that I had to find my keys, and you won't believe it, they were in my jacket pocket. It was funny because I had worn my jacket yesterday. I do really like my jacket. It's important to have a good jacket for this bad weather. Anyways, I found my keys and headed to the meeting and we discussed our new product. So you can see it's a very long-winded response, but at the end the patient does get to the point about the meeting and what they discussed there, but it takes a lot of steps to get there. Next up, we have tangentiality. This is when a patient responds obliquely, so they give long-winded answers that don't get to the point. You can contrast this with circumstantiality, where they do get to the point. So an example of this would be, this guy Bob, who's asked, do you know what time the meeting is? And then Bob goes, oh, meetings really overwhelm me. I remember about a month ago at the last meeting when we talked about a really complex project. Speaking of complex projects, I've been reading about the latest developments on robotics. So you could see in response to a very simple question that things kind of veer in a different direction and it results in a very long-winded answer that's completely unrelated to the question. Next up, we have clanging. So this is when a patient may string words together because of how they sound rather than what they mean. So an example of this would be, I will take a pill if I go up the hill. My name is Jill and this is a thrill. So you see that rhyming pattern. It's not necessarily always rhyming, but that's a pretty common presentation of it. Next up is neologism. So this is when a patient invents words. So an example of this is, after all this work today, I am tired-icated. So maybe a combination of two words like tired or frustrated or something along those lines. It's just a word that's made up, and this is something that can often be seen in schizophrenics. Next, we have word approximations. So this is using words that are close to the right word but aren't exactly there. So for example, calling a glove a hand shoe. Then we have echolalia. This is when a patient repeats words that are said to them. So a doctor can ask, how are you doing today? And then the patient would respond back, how are you doing today? Next, we have perseverance, and this is when a patient unintentionally repeats and dwells on a response, idea, or behavior. So an example of this is when a patient says, I really like green. Green is such a nice color. Did you know that grass is green? Grass reminds me of the forest. The forest is green. I love things that are green. So here you can see that the patient is exhibiting perseverance about the color green. Next up, we have pressure of speech, and this is intense and rapid production of speech where an individual may feel the urge to talk continuously. So an example of this would be, I woke up this morning and it was rainy outside and I saw the way the trees looked and I thought about visiting my dad, but then I need to make sure I prepare my lunch, but then I wanted to take a shower. Also, I think I want to see a movie later. So you can see this very rapid and intense production of speech where patient is kind of talking nonstop, not taking a second to breathe. Lastly, we have thought blocking, and this is a sudden interruption in a patient's train of thought or speech. So an example of this would be in the middle of a discussion about a patient's family. He says, I live with my parents, and wait, I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about? So the patient was kind of midway through a conversation, and then suddenly there's this thought blocking that goes on. They don't remember what happened or where they were in the conversation. Thank you so much for watching. Hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them below.